Our host for the evening, a practicing advocate and a trustee of the General Thimayya Memorial Trust, Karan Joseph.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 17th General Thimayya Memorial Lecture. I hope you enjoyed the short video that we just played for you. We're so pleased to see so many of you after 2 difficult years. Thank you so much for your support. Before we kick things off, may I request you to please stand for our school song. Thank you. Please be seated. We pay tribute through these lectures to Old Cottonian General K.S. Thimayya, India's 3rd and longest serving Chief of Army Staff. After Cottons, he enrolled at the Royal Indian Military College, Dehradun. He was later one of 6 Indians to be chosen to attend the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst in 1926. General Thimayya was commissioned into the British Indian Army and went on to become the first Indian to command an infantry brigade that formed part of post-World War II British Commonwealth Occupation Force in Japan. He received the British Distinguished Service Order for his service to the British military during World War II. In the late 1940s, General Thimayya was chosen to lead the counter-offensive in Kashmir and headed the Jammu and Kashmir force, playing an instrumental role in the consolidation of Ladakh. He went on to become the Chief of Army Staff from 1957 to 1961. After his retirement, the United Nations requested his services in 1964 to command their troops operating in Cyprus. General Thimayya was a compassionate, tenacious soldier who led from the front. His never-say-die attitude, particularly against adversity at our borders, made him an exemplary person and soldier throughout his career. Service runs in the General's family. His brothers too were members of the armed forces, as was his son-in-law, Major General K.M. Chengappa. Following in the General's footsteps, his daughter went to Cottons, as did his grandson, Mr. K.C. Belyappa, who is here with us today. Also with us is the General's nephew, Mr. Vivek Krishna. Thank you. We are pleased to have with us today one of our patrons, Air Marshal Trevor Osman. Thank you, sir, for your unwavering support over the years. Also in our midst is former Speaker, Ambassador C.V. Ranganathan, former medalist, Rear Admiral Sanjay Vadgaonkar, and we are extremely happy to have the principal of our friends down the road, Reverend Father Sunil Fernandez from St. Joseph's Boys High School. A warm welcome to him and our friendly Josephites. A warm welcome to the principal of Bishop Cotton Boys School, Professor Dr. Edwin Christopher, C.N. Kumar, our executive patron, former trustees, our friends from the Old Cottonians Association, Cottonians present and past, teachers, dear friends from the armed forces, friends of the trust, and the young students from Cottons and the National School of Journalism. For those of you attending your first lecture, I hope that you will be enriched by the experience, and I thank you for giving us this opportunity to showcase our alma mater, Bishop Cotton Boys School. On behalf of our patrons, Air Marshal Osman, Lieutenant General S.K. Jetli, Admiral Shekhawat, Executive Patron Mr. C.N. Kumar, and my fellow trustees, Romil, Lokesh, and Timothy, I welcome you all. May I please invite on stage the principal of Bishop Cotton Boys School, Professor Dr. Edwin Christopher, to say a few words.
A very good evening to all present here, distinguished legendaries in your own sphere of life, old Cottonians in your own professional career who have achieved and are still in the services of the country. I greet you all on behalf of the Cotton's family today this evening, and also by the grace of God, we are here assembled in this august place in the evening to memorize and materialize what the KST lectures are all about. Today we are in the 17th edition of this Thimayya's lecture, and we all know that this is one of the most important occasions that as old Cottonians we meet, we deliberate, and we look forward for a cherishable memories that takes forward in this august institution that we have spent our earlier childhood days. Irrespective of how many years you spend in this august institution never matters, but what you take away from this institution has made you come back this evening in this august gathering for you to be a part of this memory that has taken forward in the last 16 years. We all know that biographies are written, and it takes very, very long years to chart down a biography of an individual, to proclaim to the world what the personality is all about and what the achievements are of an individual that we would like to portray. In the last Thimayya's lecture, I learned these lectures are not lectures, but the unfolding of stories that is factual, that is facts, and that has happened in the lives of Cottonians. And today, what they are is proved beyond doubt with their personalities that they possess. It is that not you learn, it is how you unfold it in your life plays a very dominant role. We all have an habit of learning, and learning always paves way how to put it across in practice. But nevertheless, until and unless you synchronize your learning with practice, success will not be emerging out just like that. So all these General Thimayya's trust and the foretold of future concepts of lectures that we would like to host would be converted into folding of biographies said by the individual, not written by somebody else, but written by himself as an individual, which can motivate the younger generation today to contribute what they would like to for the society. Now, when we have the careers going on and on and on, there are several spheres of life that we need to look at. And today, as we have assembled here to listen and admire what people as Cottonians who were there 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago in this campus as children, studying in classrooms, and what they have achieved beyond classroom is a classic example to say what Cottonians can do in the world. So I hope and believe that this trend of tradition will just not continue with lectures, but endeavors of giving an insight to the younger generation of what you can achieve, and achieve big only through your dreams and personalities that you possess. Not taking much of your time, greeting you all in the precious name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I give you an ample ambience and opportunity for you to come forward to Cotton's anytime you wish to contribute what you can to this august institution, which has 156 years of old legacy in its place in the city of Bengaluru. Thank you very much. Good evening, all of you.
Thank you, sir. may I request our executive patron, Mr. C.N. Kumar, to hand over a small token of appreciation to you. May I call on stage our Managing Trustee, Old Cottonian, and the founder of Candela Labs, Mr. Romil Turakia.
Good evening, everyone. It's a tradition at these lectures to award the General Thimayya Medal to Cottonians who have demonstrated exemplary public service. The medal honors the memory of the general who, apart from his military heroics, stood tall as a leader post-retirement from the army. He headed the UN mission to Cyprus, where the civil war and the armed resistance had brought the two groups, the Turkish and the Greek groups, and Cyprus to a standstill. He dismantled the fortifications of both the groups and initiated many industrial projects between the two and kick-started the economy of Cyprus. Just like the general, our medalist today, Commodore Kartik Subramaniam, went on from an exemplary stint in the armed forces into civil service. He grew one of the most important military industrial complexes in India, the Cochin Shipyard Limited, CSL. He saw CSL grow from a revenue of circa 300 crores to circa 1900 crores in his brief 7-year tenure. The Commodore joined the Indian Navy and completed his training as a marine engineer officer in 1979. During his time in the Navy, he served in both naval dockyards at Mumbai and Visakhapatnam in various capacities. He also held staff appointments at Naval Headquarters and Command Headquarters. He attended the Defense Services Staff College and graduated with an MSc in Defense Studies from Madras University in 1992. He served the Indian Navy for 29 years before seeking premature retirement in 2007 to join CSL as Director Operations and was appointed as Chairman and Managing Director in 2011. He superannuated from CSL in December 2015. He was the CEO of Reliance Naval Engineering Limited from 2017 to 2018, and he is presently an independent director on the board of the Dredging Corporation of India, DCI. During the Commodore's tenure at CSL saw stupendous commercial growth of more than 6 times in 7 years. India also saw INS Vikrant being launched under his stewardship. INS Vikrant is India's first aircraft carrier to be built indigenously. Under Kartik's leadership, the keel was laid in February 2009, and the INS Vikrant was launched on 12th August 2013. The ship has recently started sea trials in August 2021. The total cost of the project was approximately 23,000 crores, $3.1 billion at the time of the first sea trials. Like a true officer, gentleman, and Cottonian, he refuses to take credit for most of these achievements and credits his predecessors and his teams for all the above. He modestly claims that he was not one of the toppers in his class at Cottons. Kartik Subramaniam passed out of Bishop Cotton Boys School in 1972. He was in Pettigrew House. The 2021 General Thimayya Medal for Public Service is awarded to Commodore Kartik Subramaniam, who I now please call upon stage. I would also invite on stage K.C. Belyappa, grandson of General Thimayya, to present the medal, please. I'd like to invite Commodore Subramaniam to say a few words, please.
A very good evening to all of you. It's a little dark out here and I can't see people, but I know that there are a lot of people I'm indebted to. There are former flag officers, Admiral Jacob, Commodore Prabala. There have been senior veterans, Admiral Vadgaonkar, veterans from the Air Force, from the Army and the Navy. We've got the principal, Professor Dr. Edwin Christopher, the trustees of the Thimayya Memorial Trust, Admiral Swaminathan, who will deliver the lecture after this, old Cottonians, present Cottonians, my own family, my sisters, my brothers-in-law, and I hope you're not wondering what the outlaw is doing out here. A very warm good evening to all of you, and thank you very much for coming here despite the inclement weather and sparing your time to be here this evening. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to be awarded the Thimayya Memorial Medal, and I accept this with humility and gratitude. But I do know that this medal is not in recognition of my personal endeavors, but actually a reflection of the work done by a multitude of people across various spectrums. The Indian Navy, the shipbuilding industry, the private enterprise. I mean, it's a culmination effort of all of us, which has finally resulted in successful first phase of sea trials of the aircraft carrier. Let me first thank the trustees for thinking it fit to bestow this singular honor on me. Thank you very much indeed. Let me confess that when I asked Karan Joseph what the format for this evening would be, he said you'll be given a medal and 5-10 minutes to speak. I didn't tell him then, but I'm telling you all now, and I'm telling him too. I'm one of those guys who, when you give an inch, will take a yard. So 1 minute means 10 minutes to me. So all I can say is suggest that you're in for a long haul, and those of you who want to go to sleep may actually slip into slumber. The indigenous aircraft carrier, I think, is a stupendous achievement for this country. There are only about 5 other countries in the world who are capable of actually designing and building an aircraft carrier. So we are one of the very few countries in the world who have this capability. I think that's some achievement. But we need to put this in a context, and when Romel was saying that I don't take credit, rightly so, because I was just the right chap at the right place. And the credit actually is due to a whole lot of people, and particularly the ecosystem which allowed this to happen or made this happen. At the time of independence, the Indian Navy inherited some old frigates, a destroyer, a cruiser, and we had a very modest fleet. We also went across, bought some ships, some submarines from the Soviet Union, erstwhile Soviet Union. But then it is to the credit of these visionary planners in naval headquarters who sometime in the late 50s, early 60s decided that this country would have a robust indigenous shipbuilding, warship building capability. So foundation for the aircraft carrier was laid way back in the late 50s and early 60s. And if you don't mind, and I beg your indulgence, I'll take a little time, because I think this is important. The setting up of a small group of naval engineers who were designated as naval constructors, and they were trained in UK, and later on some of them were sent for training in Russia. They formed the nucleus of what was called, or what is called, the Directorate of Naval Design. So this small group, and today of course it's grown multifold. We've got two directorates. We've got a Director of Naval Design surface group and also a submarine group. But the beginning was very small, very modest. And this was sometime in 1964. The Design Directorate actually designed a small seaward defense boat, and it got built in Garden Reach Shipbuilding Engineers. Thereafter, and again, you see the ecosystem had to be built. So the government signed an agreement with Yarrow's Shipbuilders UK, and we built 6 frigates, the Nilgiri class frigates, in Mazagon Dock. The shipbuilding skills, and I don't want to get into the details of what happened to our shipbuilding skills during the British Raj. We had no skills at the time of independence, so these had to be revived. So Mazagon Dock was acquired by the government of India, and we signed an agreement with the shipbuilder in UK, and we built 6 ships. The first 4 were built as per specs, but the last 2, Taragiri and Vindhyagiri, actually were modified to accommodate a bigger helicopter on the helideck. And this was done by the group of naval designers at Delhi. Now, most significantly, at that time, they got into designing the Godavari class of frigates. And this was actually based on the same design as the Leander class, but it was larger and heavier. They used the same propulsion system of the Leander class on the Godavari class and achieved a speed of 1 knot more. Now, to put it in perspective, it's like taking the engine of a Maruti 800, putting it on a Honda City and expecting the Honda City to get the same speed and power. But wonder of wonders, this did happen. And that is, apart from the hydrodynamics and the various other things which are too technical to go into, the group of naval designers had come of age. Thereafter, of course, subsequently, we have now designed, and today, we've got the Delhi class, we've got the Kolkata class, we've got the Vishakhapatnam class, we've got the Shivalik class. We've got an entire spectrum of ships being built in India. We are not importing any ships, or rather, we can count them on our fingers. The number of ships that we are actually acquiring from abroad is very, very few. But the culmination of all this effort was in building and attempting to build the indigenous aircraft carrier. So the foundation for this aircraft carrier is actually a progression from building frigates, destroyers, and so on and so forth till we reach the aircraft carrier. And I think that is why I keep telling my friend that no single individual can be credited for the success of the aircraft carrier project. But coming to the aircraft carrier, since he's mentioned it, and I'll take another perhaps 5 minutes, the aircraft carrier project itself was an exceedingly challenging project. Admiral Jacob is here. He was the vice chief at that time. A lot of eyebrows will be raised as to why the costs have gone up and so on and so forth. But again, you see, this was conceived in the late 80s. We had a financial crisis in 1991, which everybody is aware of. So money was in short supply. So the Navy, and let me tell you, naval officers are very smart. I may be an exception. So the Navy said, no, if there's not too much of money, we'll go for a smaller aircraft carrier. So we said we'll go in for an air defense ship. And then when, the economy turned around, money started coming in. So finally we went back to the government and said, give us an aircraft carrier. So Admiral Jacob, who is the father of this project, is still here. And sir, congratulations, thank you very much. So I bask in the glory that you actually, set out. The building of the aircraft carrier was a huge challenge. So though it was designed, it was supposed to be using, we were supposed to build it using Russian steel. But due to a set of factors, which we don't need to go into, the Russians refused to supply the steel. So the DoD lab, the Defense Metallurgical Research Laboratory, developed the steel, now designated as DMR 249 Alpha and 249 Bravo, and 249 Alpha is now standard steel which is being used across the board for warship building in the country. They developed the steel, transferred the technology to SAIL, and SAIL turned out the steel with which we built the ship. And we had a lot of challenges to surmount. We had to develop new weld procedures, inspection procedures, jigs, fixtures, and so on and so forth. In terms of size and scale, the aircraft carrier is far more bigger, heavier than any other warship that we have built. And this was being built in Cochin Shipyard, which was actually a commercial shipbuilding yard. I mean, till the aircraft carrier order was placed in Cochin Shipyard, it was only building merchant vessels. And this was the first warship that we were entrusted with. So the Navy, I'm sure, took a huge leap of faith in placing that order on Cochin Shipyard and hoped that, we'd deliver. And the shipyard had to develop the capability to meet the stringent requirements of warship building. These two things are very different. Commercial shipbuilding is built to class. The requirements are not all that stringent. But warship building is actually to a very different level. You have a lot of oversight. I used to have, somebody called the warship production superintendent, breathing down my neck all the time. So it's a very different system and a very different level of skill that you have to master to build warships. So this was done, and I have my successor, Director Ops, who played a very, very significant role, Captain Sundar. I also saw him sometime in the evening today. So he did a lot of good work, and the entire team pulled together, and we were able to get the ship going. We did some 8,000 tons of steel. At one point in time, Cochin Shipyard was full of steel blocks lying all over the place. We put them all together, and we had a lot of challenges. There were delays. We had problems in the supply of the gearbox. We had problems with getting the generators. We had problems. So we had a lot of problems, and that's probably a subject of another talk. But essentially, we put this entire hull together, and in 2013, we said we'll launch the ship. So I, as a chairman at that time, went to the Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral D.K. Joshi, and told him, sir, we are ready. You please find a date. We'd be honored if you can come along with the defense minister and have Mrs. Antony, who was then the defense minister. Mrs. Antony launched the ship. Ships are always launched by a lady. So he said, fine. So I had taken a presentation with me. I showed him the presentation. At the end of the presentation, he said, sorry, Subbu, this ship is not getting launched. So I was taken aback. I said, sir, but we are ready. Now, I'm sorry I'm not able to show it to you graphically, but what we had put together was a ship without the ski jump. Both Vikramaditya and Vikrant have a ski jump where the ship actually, it's a sort of a ramp on which the aircrafts take off. Now, typically, and we have a lot of Air Force veterans, commercial ships have a runway between 2 to 3 kilometers long. On the aircraft carrier, that's about less than 200 meters. So, in about 1/10 to 1/15 of the length of a runway, you got to have this aircraft airborne. So, that portion of the ramp was not there. We couldn't put it because we had a limitation in the, draft that we could meet. We didn't have a dock which was deep enough for us to put all that weight on the ship. So we said, we can't do it. So he said, if you can't do it, then you're not launching it. So I was very dejected. I was very hassled, depressed. So I came back to Cochin, I called my team and I told them, they were all waiting to find out when we are going to launch the aircraft carrier. And this was sometime in June 2013, between 3rd and 10th of June. So I came back and I told my team, I'm sorry, but we are not going to launch the aircraft carrier like this. They said, why? So I said, we don't have a ski jump and it doesn't look like an aircraft carrier. It looks like a ship which has got its nose boxed in. And the Chief of Naval Staff says, sorry, you're not launching the ship. So they told me, sir, you're an engineer. We can't put that ramp. They're about almost 3,000 tons. You know what will happen? You put that much of steel, the whole ship will, turn turtle. I said, I don't know, gentlemen, but we got to put this ramp and only then we're going to launch the ship. Now, I think this is where, and the Navy was saying that now the Chief of Naval Staff has taken a decision and that's a decision, right? Please put the ramp, then we'll talk. As we grow older, we start doubting the competence of our youngsters. But let me tell you, there's a lot of talent. And 2 young naval architects from Cochin Shipyard knocked on my door a couple of days later and said, sir, we think we have a solution. Can you give us 10 minutes? I said, yeah, please come. So they said, we'll put buoyancy pontoons, right? I said, what is this? They said, we'll put pontoons, right, which will help the ship float. After we put this ski jump, and it will still be stable. It's, something similar to the float that people use to learn swimming. I said, will it work? He said, definitely, sir. So I called my WPS, now Admiral Menon, that time he was a Commodore. So he said, no, sir, I can't sanction this, I can't approve it. I'll have to talk to DG&D. I said, what's your problem? He said, this has never been done. You're building the aircraft carrier. We don't have an embarrassment when you float off the ship and it doesn't float. So we went back to IRS, the Indian Register of Shipping. We got this whole thing validated. We got all our calculations scrutinized. Then I called him and told him, listen, we got to do it. So with a lot of, I think, reluctance, the Navy finally agreed. They said, go ahead, but make sure that the ship floats, right? And this was sometime in June. So between June and 12th of August 2013, we put these pontoons. It was very intricate. It was, and let me tell you, and this is not casting aspersions on MDL. MDL had been building warships from 1970s onwards. And they were having a problem launching ships with, increased draft because the water available there is very low. So they were talking to the Russians to find out how to put these pontoons. And here we were, upstarts in a manner of speaking, saying that we'll launch the aircraft carrier with these pontoons. So it was a little difficult for them to swallow this, but then they swallowed it. And I'm happy to state that on 12th of August 2013, the first indigenous aircraft carrier was launched, and it was a picture-perfect launch. She came out. He came out no list, trim, I think 750 millimeters by aft as per the design, and she floated out so beautifully. So that, I think, gave me a lot of satisfaction, no doubt, made me very proud, and that was a learning that you need to trust your team. Solutions can be found. Perhaps if the Chief of Naval Staff had not pushed us, we wouldn't have done it. It was good that he pushed us, and when she came out, she looked absolutely beautiful. So that was the story of the aircraft carrier launching. Subsequently, of course, we've put in a lot of work. We've got all the outfit done, and I know she's gone off to trials. I need to befriend my friend Admiral Swaminathan so that sometime, perhaps in the future, I can take a ride on that ship. It will be a great pleasure. I have not sailed on that ship. I've seen a few clips, and what strikes me is it's absolutely magnificent. It's majestic, it looks so nice. So, and that, of course, I must credit my team, both at the shipyard, and thank the support that I received from the Indian Navy throughout that time so that we could construct this aircraft carrier and launcher. So it's a tribute to the complete ecosystem of shipbuilding in the country that we've been able to achieve this on our own. So with that, I'd like to just thank the trustees once again for bestowing this singular honor on me, and I hope I am worthy of the honor. Thank you very much for taking your time and coming this evening. And last but not the least, I'd like to dedicate this medal to my parents who made me what I am today. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Commodore Subramaniam. It is an honor and my privilege to introduce our speaker today, Vice Admiral Krishna Swaminathan, Old Cottonian, Pope House. The Admiral is a recipient of the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal and the Vishisht Seva Medal. Commissioned into the Indian Navy on 1st July 1987, Admiral Swaminathan is an alumnus of the National Defense Academy. We couldn't find a picture of the Admiral in his Cotton's khakis, but we managed to do one better. That's a picture of him with his course mates at the NDA, right up front. He's also an alumnus of the Joint Services Command and Staff College, United Kingdom, the College of Naval Warfare, Karanja, and the United States Naval War College in Rhode Island. On promotion to the flag rank, he served as the Chief Staff Officer Training at Headquarters Southern Naval Command, Cochin, and played a key role in the conduct of all training in the Indian Army, in the Indian Navy. He was simultaneously instrumental in raising the Indian Navy safety team that oversees operational safety across all verticals of the Navy. He went on from there to head the workup organization of the Indian Navy as Flag Officer Sea Training, and was thereafter privileged to tenant the extremely prestigious appointment of Flag Officer Commanding Western Fleet. On completion of an eventful fleet command, he was appointed Flag Officer Offshore Defense Advisory Group and Advisor Offshore Security and Defense to the Government of India, and functioned in that capacity prior to assuming his current assignment. A specialist in communication and electronic warfare, the Admiral has held several key appointments, including the command of the aircraft carrier INS Vikramaditya, the flagship and centerpiece of the Navy's operations, guided missile destroyer INS Mysore, missile corvette INS Coolish, and the missile vessels INS Vidyut and Vinash. This here is a picture of the Admiral on the INS Vikramaditya. This is a picture of the Admiral with the President of Sri Lanka during one of his visits there. The Admiral has 5 degrees, a BSc, an MSc in telecommunication, an MA in defense studies, an MPhil in strategic studies, and a PhD in international studies. The decision to invite the Admiral to be our speaker for this year's lecture was unanimous, and we are thrilled that he accepted our invitation without any hesitation. I've been fortunate to speak with him over several weeks to coordinate this lecture, and I admire most of all his humility and self-effacing nature. He assumed charge as the Chief of Staff of the Western Naval Command on 4th November 2021. As most of you are aware, the Western Naval Command is the sword arm of the Indian Navy. The command is responsible for all naval forces in the Arabian Sea, western parts of the Indian Ocean, and the naval establishments on our west coast. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a treat. Please welcome on stage Vice Admiral Krishna Swaminathan.
trustees of the General KS Thimayya Trust, respected principal, Dr. Christopher, respected veterans from the Army, Navy, and Air Force, young old Cottonians and current Cottonians, ladies and gentlemen. I can't even begin to say how happy and privileged I feel this evening to be invited to deliver the General KS Thimayya Memorial Lecture. I made it a point this evening to come a little early and walk around the school. Not so much to see how the school may have grown, because obviously schools like this grow a lot, and they grow a lot every day, but more to be a part of what I've seen in my early days. It has been a very eventful and relatively successful life, but certainly it wouldn't have been as rewarding or indeed memorable had it not started from here. So I'm so grateful and honored to have this opportunity to come back and reconnect, not just with my school, but some of my old buddies as well. This is a very mixed audience, but it's very intimidating as well. I've got my immediate family, my father, brother, sister, everybody here. I've got my classmates who were with me in school, with whom I grew up. I've got my classmates that I went from my second school as well. I went to Science School Bijapur from here. I have my principal of Science School Bijapur sitting here. I have very respected senior veterans whom I've grown with, grown up looking up to, and whom I've been mentored by. So this is a little intimidating, but I'm so honored to be here, and I'll try my best to give you a flavor of what the Navy does. Oops. Okay. So when I was invited to talk, this was the topic that we came around to after several iterations. And I just thought I'll talk about why sea power is important for national security and economic growth. And this is, the challenge of talking on this topic is, of course, threefold. One, it's a huge topic. It's very complex. Two, this is a very mixed audience. And three, of course, I've got very limited time. So what I'll try and do is give you a flavor of how navies across the world operate, what factors they take into consideration in building themselves, organizing themselves, and working. It's not very difficult to extrapolate from what I say, about the Indian Navy itself. I'll try and put in context how navies operate internationally, and why is it important for every navy and every naval person to have an international outlook. And of course, my whole aim of my presentation is to kind of give you a context on what the Indian Navy does. You may not find me giving you the specifics of what the Navy does, but I understand there's a Q&A session at the end of this, and I'll be very happy to answer questions there. Let me start by showing you this visual. This, of course, is a map of the world. It's a geographic map. And a couple of things that stand out from this is that it's a very heterogeneous kind of landmass. It's interconnected. It's very heterogeneous. It's got different colors. There's some in green, some in brown, some in white. Obviously, this is the landmass that's divided into nations that are unequal. They're unequal in their sizes, they're unequal in their resources, they're unequal in their environmental conditions, they're unequal in what they've been endowed with. But the dominant color on this, of course, is blue. And for good reason, this is called a watery planet. But it's not just important to call this a watery or blue planet. It's important also to know that if you've got to go from any part of the world to any other part on the land, you will stumble across some obstacle, some kind of an impediment. But if you've got to go on the water, there's nothing that stops you from going from the left to the right and coming back to the left, or indeed going north and south. And for good reason, the seas have been known to be common heritage of mankind, and the first and most important global commons. And that's why we say the sea actually unites people, because everybody is connected to each other through the sea. And that's why we say the freedom of navigation is indeed an important aspect. And I'll talk about freedom of navigation if there's a need during the Q&A. But let's go to this. This is the same map. It's a political map of the world. And it shows, of course, the entire landmass of the world has been divided into nations. We all know that from the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, the nation state has been the basic unit of international interactions. And this map shows us several, these are about 192 or close to 200 countries of different colors. And they all form what we call the international system. And there are rules in the international system under which they operate. But each of these nations builds itself, looks after what it defines for itself as its national interests, tries to build its own national power in terms of economics, in terms of military power, in terms of its diplomacy, in terms of its industrial power, in terms of its intellectual power, the power of ideas, the power of values, the power of interconnectedness. All of these exist together. And this is what makes the world so interesting. How do you define national power? And what is national power? And why do nations need to develop national power? Because these nations don't live in isolation. They live in a very competitive international environment where many times they've got to compete with other nations for their own survival. And so national power can be defined broadly as the ability of a nation to influence outcomes in its own interests in the international system. And that's what every nation tries to do. And how do you gain national power? You gain your economic power, you gain industrial power, and a very important aspect of that, of course, is military power. What is national security, of course? All of this, you build national power to enhance your national security. But how do you understand national security itself? Is it a sense of well-being of a nation? Is it a sense of the nation being able to look after its people, look after the welfare, it's all of that. And so every nation pursues its national security by developing its own national power, and it starts promoting and projecting its own national interests. None of it is different for India as well. This is a picture that all of you would like to see, because when you look at the sea, it is not just the blue waters that you saw there, but this is a very huge ecosystem. Because to date, the world has moved along in its technology in all kinds of ways and in all kinds of forms. But in terms of transportation economics, it is still the most economical mode of transport to send your goods from one place to the other, no matter what the distance is through the sea. So international commerce, international trade, global prosperity, economic growth of nations individually and of nations as a collective depends a lot on the business and the trade and commerce that's transacted on the sea. And this is a very, very important aspect of global security, regional security, national security, and indeed, Indian security. So if you see where the world has gone today, the world that we inherit today is a distillation of what's happened in the last 50, 60, 100 years. If you take a very quick look at how the world is today, there is a process of globalization where people are interconnected, economies are interconnected, monies flow from place to place, economies are integrated and things like that. We all know that in Europe was where the whole industrial revolution started. All the industrial growth, the industrial development all started in Europe, and from there started the need for resources, and thereafter from there started the whole concept of colonization of various people, colonization of various places, and of course imperialism all over the world. So if you throw ourselves back about 100 years, in the 1900s, there was the economy that was based on a manufacturing world, of a production world, and of resources. The world was so integrated that people at that stage said that there could not be any more wars, because different parts of the world are so interdependent and so integrated. And they thought, there were a lot of people who said there wouldn't be wars. And how wrong they were, because in 1915, of course, we had the First World War. And the First World War came at the end of years and decades and centuries of fighting in Europe. And many people call the First World War the Great War, the war that was meant to end all wars. It was fought at a huge, huge human cost, at a huge cost of loss of life, material damage, destruction, and everything else. And when the First World War got over, there were a lot of people who said there aren't going to be any more wars again. It just took 3 decades or thereabouts when we had the Second World War. And when the First World War transformed the world in many ways, so did the Second World War. At the end of the Second World War, we had the end of imperialism in many places. We have new nations growing, the concept of democracy growing. But that wasn't the end. The end of World War II gave birth to the beginning of the Cold War. And that went on for about 3 or 4 decades, till about 1989-1990. And then, of course, now we are in the post-Cold War world, which started about in the early 90s. And initially they said, of course, from the two poles, the Western bloc that was led by the United States and NATO, and the Eastern bloc that was the former Soviet Union. When the former Soviet Union dissolved, they said that's going to be the end of warfare, that's going to be the end of war. It was a monopolar world. And then, of course, we lived in this uneasy phase where a lot of people were waiting for something to happen. The world was in a transition. America was a dominant power, but a lot of people questioned the power of America and said it's diminishing and things like that. And then we had this whole specter of the rise of China. A lot of talk about the rise of China. Was it a peaceful rise? It was, very famously called the peaceful rise of China. And, the world that we have today is a world that is in relative terms a little unsettled. It's unpredictable. It's uncertain. People have called it in various terms. 5 or 6 years back, it was fashionable to call it a VUCA world, a VUCA. It is chaotic. It is, kind of ambiguous. There was confusion and all of that. It's volatile, uncertain, confused, and ambiguous. That was the world. That continues to be here. That the world continues to be that in some form or the other today. We're in a power transition. There's a power transition in very many forms. There's not just a distribution of political power, there's a redistribution of economic power as well. So the world today, as we see it, is a little unpredictable, is a little unsettled. There are enormous number of threats that threaten countries. It's a combination of old, existing historical animosities, new kinds of threats, conventional threats, non-conventional threats, and hybrid threats of all kinds. So the world today is it's a little unsettled, and all of us feel that it's a little difficult to say in what form or shape it's going to take. And I'll be very happy to take on questions on that as well as we move along. Let's zoom into the Indian Ocean region. This is the Indian Ocean region. This is the third largest ocean in the world. The Indian Ocean region has a very dichotomous nature. This is a very important place of the world for international trade. It's a very important place of the world for international security and stuff like that. But by itself, while being tremendously important to global strategic stability, it has a lot of unstable factors by itself, within itself. And I'm going to talk a little about that. This is a picture of the Indian Ocean region. And just to give you context, this is where much of the world's trade and commerce flows from. The countries in the Gulf are very rich in petroleum products, and they export petroleum products everywhere. There are about 100,000 to 150,000 ships that ply through these waters every single year. 65% of global oil trade, 35% of bulk cargo, and about 50% of the world's container traffic passes through this area every single year. So this is massive. It is massive for the economic stability, not only for the people within this region, but for people outside the region. And the unique feature of the Indian Ocean region is, of course, that a higher proportion of the trade that flows through these waters is not for countries within the region. It's for extra-regional countries as well. And therefore, there is a lot of extra-regional interest in what happens in the Indian Ocean region. It's got a lot of shipping lanes and choke points. And these are critical. The red lines that you see are the global shipping lanes, and on this plies the trade and commerce that determines the economic prosperity of the entire world. The ones that emerge from the Persian Gulf, they carry oil. The one that comes from the Gulf of Aden, the Horn of Africa, they go all to feed the economies in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the South China Sea, China, Japan, Philippines, and the rest of us. These are crucial, not just for world commerce, but also for global security. This is how it looks. These are sea lines, and each of those dots is a ship. And this is a graph that you can see every single day. And it's not so difficult to miss when you're sitting in our offices somewhere else to know that there's a whole world out there that happens. And all of us, not known to us, this bottle may have come from somewhere. this, this device may have come from somewhere. So this is how busy and this is how important the Indian Ocean region is. This is another grab, and this is an actual grab of what we call an AIS picture, but this is an actual grab. It's a map, and this is the density of the shipping that goes through these waters every single day. That is India, ladies and gentlemen, and each of those green dots is a ship or a boat. And so that's so thick, and these are the sea lines and the sea lanes. These are the choke points. All the sea lanes emerge from here, and this is where these are bottlenecks, and constricting any of them can actually stop trade and disbalance global trade and global security. These choke points are very, very important. There's one in the Strait of Hormuz that gives passage into the Gulf of into the Persian Gulf, the Suez Canal there, the Gulf of Aden, the Straits of Bab el-Mandab, the Malacca Straits that makes all the trade go through the Southeast Asia, South China Sea, and the Japan Sea, the Sunda Strait and Lombok Strait. These are very crucial for global security, global commerce, and all of these, ladies and gentlemen, are in the Indian Ocean region. And because of that, we've got multinational interest, extra-regional interest, and extra-regional forces. These forces were deployed here in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, in what was then called the Global War on Terror. And all of you would recollect that the Global War on Terror started in the AFPAC region, and a lot of multinational ships were posted there. And then we had this whole specter of piracy in the Horn of Africa and the Gulf of Aden. So these were initially these found themselves being deployed there for the Global War on Terror. And they continue to stay there today, to the extent that even today there are about 125 warships at all times from between 20 and 25 nations here. So this is a much contested space. This is the space that has captured international imagination. This is the space that everybody is watching, because no matter where they are, their fortunes depend on what happens here. And this is important for all of us to know, because this is the space in which India exists and the Indian Navy functions. This is India's neighborhood, and this is the Indian Ocean region. The dichotomous nature of the Indian Ocean region, of course, was that on the one hand, it is extremely important for global commerce, global trade, and international economic development. And on the other, if you have a survey of the countries here, you see you have 1/3 of the world's population that lives in 1/4, less than 1/4 of the land mass, which means it's densely packed with people. If you have a look at these countries, many of these countries are developing countries. They have impoverished populations. They have people who don't look to a very bright future. It's a place that has all kinds of problems here, apart from having the largest number of natural disasters in the world. The tsunami of 2004, floods, famine, all kinds of things happen here. There are people who live with pre-existing historical animosities. They have unresolved boundary issues. They have unresolved conflicts. They have pre-existing conflicts. This is the hotbed of global terrorism. This is where global terrorism comes from. And from there, you see the Golden Crescent, where there's drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms smuggling, illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. All kinds of things happen here. Because of that, the region itself has potential for very, very high instability. There's piracy in the Horn of Africa, the Gulf of Aden, and therefore, the stability and the security of this region also has always been a huge challenge, not just for the nations that live here, but the nations that are extra-regional as well. Is this going to be the 21st century battle space? That has been a question that's been engaging all of us, and I would think, of course, there's high potential for that. So let's see where India is in all of this. India is a large developing country, we know that. We have a huge population. We have a strong and emerging economy. We have remarkable demographics, and a lot of people say that we have a huge population. Is it an advantage? Not an advantage? That time will tell. But we've got, at the moment, our belief is that we've got a huge demographic dividend, as they call it. We have huge national interests as well. And what are our national interests? As has been stated by us several times and has been acknowledged across the world, our first national interest is national development. All of us would recall that in 1947, when we got our independence, we were a country of huge teeming masses and a poor country that had the huge challenge of bringing out a huge number of people from below the poverty line. Our internal developmental goals are hugely ambitious. So our first national interest is sustained internal development. We are a country also that's big, that has aspirations to play an important role in the world, and therefore we need to have active international engagement. That is the second, and at least we want recognition that is proportional to our size and importance in the world and the values we bring to the world and the international system. We have foreign policy objectives. Our broad foreign policy under which we interact with the rest of the nations have been defined by 2 or 3 founding principles. The first thing, of course, is that we want to have what we call strategic autonomy. And what does that mean? That simply means we just want to be guided by our own we want to be guided by our own destiny. We want to make our own decisions. We want to just decide by ourselves what is good and what is not so good for us. Is that a legitimate requirement? Yes. Is it always possible? It is not. Because if you see the time when we came out with this a self-description that we want to be strategically autonomic, it was in the time of the Cold War. India's independence coincided with the birth of the Cold War, and almost all nations of the world were compelled to take sides. You either go this way or that way. And we said, sorry, we're not going anywhere. All of us would recollect that the founding principle of our foreign policy was non-alignment. We are not going to align ourselves to any bloc. We want to do just what is right for us. So if you want to be strategically autonomous, you've got to have your national power that allows you to do that. And how do you do that? You've got to build your military, you've got to build your diplomatic heft, you've got to build your industrial might, you've got to build friendships, partnerships, you've got to engage very actively in the region and extra-regionally. You've got to make sure, and this is very important, you've got to make sure that you have a very stable and secure environment in which can promote your national growth. And this is very, very important for us, because as a country, we depend a lot on our external trade for economic development, and that economic development is what is going to enable national development internally. But that economic development depends crucially on the trade that plies on the sea for us. And ladies and gentlemen, of course you would know this, that about 90% by volume and about 75% by value of India's external trade goes by the sea. We are energy deficient as a country, and we had the COP26 discussions last week, and a lot of people said that we need to stop importing fossil fuels, and we were the country that said, sorry, we can't do that, because if you stop importing fossil fuels or reduce fossil fuels, we can't have the internal development, we can't grow economically. We need to continue doing this. We're hugely dependent on the sea for our energy security. 80% of our import of crude oil comes from the sea. Let's just reiterate these statistics. 95% by volume, 75% by value of our trade is by sea, and 80% of our oil imports are by the sea. And these are hugely important for our national development and for our economic growth. And therefore, stability and security in this region are extremely crucial to us. Please recall the potential of this region to be unstable by itself. That's important. Let's describe India. Where is India's location? What's India's geography? And therefore, what do we obtain out of that? We are a peninsular country that has a peninsular orientation. We jut out into the Indian Ocean. We've got the sea on either side. We've got a huge coastline, 7,516 kilometers. We've got a huge exclusive economic zone, 2.02 million square kilometers, which is about 2/3 of a landmass, which means we've got sea areas in which we are allowed internationally to exploit economically, which measures about 2/3 of our land mass. That's massive. We straddle the Indian Ocean region. We dominate the Indian Ocean region, and we are located in the east-west connect, exactly where the sea lanes pass. And therefore, we are not only impacted by the global trade and the people who use the sea lanes, but we are also in a position to dominate these sea lanes and influence international outcomes if we need to do that. But we have threats. We have a threat from the time we were independent in the form of Pakistan. We have a threat in the form of China. We have other threats. These threats, and now we've got new threats, the threat of terrorism, piracy, the nexus, the so-called unholy nexus between drug trade, piracy, terrorism, all of that comes and impacts us. So we've got conventional threats, we've got unconventional threats, and all our threats are present, standing, and immediate. And therefore, we need armed forces that are deployed day in and day out, every single day, to do that. What do navies do, and what does the Indian Navy do in its daily life? Navies pre-position themselves wherever they want. They go where the national interests take them. They have to be where they think they can smell trouble. So that when the trouble happens, they're already pre-positioned, and they are in a position to go and do something there. The Indian Navy pre-positions itself in all these places. We call them mission-based deployments. And ladies and gentlemen, even as we speak, every single day of your lives and mine, there is a naval ship in each of these red circles. We are pre-positioned. We are there in the Persian Gulf, in the Gulf of Aden, the South Indian Ocean region, the Malacca Straits, the Bay of Bengal, and at the tip of the peninsula. Because many times it takes nothing for the security situation to deteriorate very, very fast. It takes time to move forces. And simply because we have been pre-positioned, in the last 20, 30 years that I can remember, the Indian Navy has been effective and successful in being the first responder wherever there's been a crisis, a contingency, or an emergency. So that is important. What do navies do, and why do nations need navies? Nations need navies simply because much of what they do depends on what happens on the sea. Why navies? Because if you move army from place to place, an army normally does not go beyond its land borders unless they have to. And if they have to, it's normally taken as an invasion. Air forces, of course, go many times and do a lot of things, but air forces, there are sovereign airspaces. You can't go into somebody else's air defense identification zone without permission. You can't go without violating somebody's airspace unless you have prior permission. Navies have no such encumbrance. The navies can go wherever they want. They have the right of access. There's something called the territorial sea, which is just about 12 miles from the coast of a nation. If you can avoid those 12 miles, navies can go anywhere. You can be positioned at 12.5 miles from a coast of a nation, and there's no offense. There's no legal law broken, and that's well within your rights. So navies have access, they have mobility, they have versatility. They can do one role, they can do some other role, just being there. They have flexibility. They can go where they want, they can come back without any loss of face, without any embarrassment, without making news, without doing anything, without new. You go there, you pre-position yourself, nobody knows it. There's no requirement, come back. Nobody knows it. No loss of face, no investment, no permission, no nothing. So they have sustainability. They can sustain themselves. Navies are self-contained forces. They go hundreds of miles away. They stay there. They stay there for months, and when the time comes, they go and hit. So navies are all of this. And because of all of this, navies are very flexible and useful instruments of national policy. They support foreign policy a lot. They do what the national policy wants to do. And so navies are used as very flexible instruments of national power all over the world. And all of us know, of course, that the British Navy, the Royal Navy, and indeed the US Navy have made these two countries dominate the world. So the Indian Navy does all of that as well. We have broadly 4 roles in which we organize ourselves. Our first role is the military role, which is the first part of the military role is war fighting. If indeed there's war, we need to fight. We need to fight a swift war and make sure that we win. But when there's no war, there's the long time of peace, and peace exists because we ensure deterrence. And much of the Navy's deployment is because of deterrence. So in its military role, the Navy ensures deterrence at all times, and when deterrence fails, we equip ourselves and we get ourselves ready every single day of our lives to fight a swift war and get the outcomes that we want. The second role, of course, we've got is a diplomatic role. We pride ourselves in how we support India's foreign policy. We are wherever the Navy, the nation wants us to go. Where the Prime Minister goes, we go. Where the Foreign Minister goes, we go. Where there's a hotspot, we go. Where there's trouble, we go. Where anybody wants a hand of friendship to be raised to them, we go. Where anybody thinks there's going to be a problem, we go. Where people want help, we go. Where there's a natural calamity, we go. Where there's a natural disaster, we go. So we go in all places. We maintain presence. We do what we call shaping a positive maritime environment. And that takes a lot of time in our lives. What does that mean? We pre-position ourselves wherever we are. We interact with other navies. We interact with other governments. We try and shape opinion there. We try and garner friendships. We try and help people there. So, you know, it's an esoteric kind of term, but we do that in our daily lives. We shape a favorable maritime environment by maintaining presence, engaging people. Our diplomats are proactive. And then we do a lot of maritime security cooperation with a lot of these countries. We do a lot of bilateral exercises to build interoperability and to operate with them should the needs arise whenever it does. But largely, it's important for navies to operate together because that, you know, enhances trust, that enhances confidence. You know, nations engage with each other at various levels. When they engage each other at the diplomatic level, that's normal life, that's no news. When they come to engaging themselves at a military level, that's a little special because you open yourself out as a military to some other military. You know, if you have a weapon, if you show somebody a weapon, that's an article of faith. So we interact a lot with other armed forces. We respond a lot to regional contingencies. Humanitarian assistance and disaster relief is an area in which we've been particularly good in the last 20, 30 years. You would recall, I mean, all the examples that I said recently, Cyclone Taute, but even before that, wherever there's a need, we go there. And of course, you know, the fact that when the tsunami struck in 2004, the Indian Navy could muster about 26, 27 ships, about 35, 40 aircraft, and about 12,000 people, all deployed all over the Indian Ocean region within 24 hours. It stunned the world. It stunned the world. When everybody was still coming to terms with what was happening, the Navy ships were already there with generators, food, medical supplies, medical officers, you know, life support systems, and the rest of it. So we do this because, you know, we anticipate where the hotspots are, we get ourselves ready, and we move there. And one of the things we try to do a lot, and hopefully we are quite effective in that, is being a preferred security partner to all nations in the Indian Ocean region. Because we truly believe that there is no one nation by itself that can ensure security here. The threats are too complex, the threats are too widespread, the threats are too diverse, and the threats are omnipresent. You need to muster the collective capability of everybody in the region to make sure you're able to respond to them well. The other nations that we have, our other maritime partners, are not as capable, they're not as rich, they can't invest so much money in their navies, so we help them in the way that we can. We do capacity building and capability enhancement, and wherever we can. So the Indian Navy does all of this, and these are the bilateral exercises we do. This is just you know, a snapshot, but there are a lot more we do. If there's a navy in the world that matters, we interact with that navy. And if there's any navy in the world that matters, they invite us, they seek us out. And so we go and interact with these people on a daily basis, every year, year after year. And that is a snapshot of the Malabar that happened a couple of years back. We maintain surveillance in this entire area. Maritime domain awareness is very, very important. In all that maze of ships, sea lanes, and the busy world that's out at sea, we need to know, to the extent that we can, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, who can be trusted, who cannot. And that doesn't happen, you know, unless you do it on a daily basis. So we invest a lot of effort in bringing what we call a recognized maritime picture of this chaos. So we watch this on a daily basis, we keep it under surveillance, and we do it. We do patrols there. We do the easy patrols of these friendly foreign nations because they don't have the ability. By the way, these small nations are subject to the same threats that we are: terrorism, piracy, the rest of it. And since they don't have the capacity, they give us a call once in a while, and we've committed some forces to go and do the EZ patrols there. We do coordinated patrols with these guys in various important choke points, and you recognize that all these are important choke points, and we do EZ patrol, we do coordinated patrols as well with them. These are daily tasks, but they're important, and all of these add, and when you join the dots, it finally leads to India as a nation being not just a dominant player in the region, but a benign leader. And that's one of the main aims of a foreign policy. Be helpful to people that need your help. We keep this under surveillance. These are the nations that we do capacity building and capability enhancement for. We've given them some vessels, we've sold them some arms, ammunition, but more than that, we enable them through training, we enable them through going and repairing the ships and all of that. Small nations, they come to us, they look up to us, they're very important neighbors, they are geopolitically very, very important in our frame of reference. We respect them a lot, we work a lot with them, and we find that it's important to influence thought there. We interact with them a lot. So these are broadly what I said. So let me quickly round up my arguments. Geopolitics in the 21st century is very, very complex. There is global contestation. There is a competitive international environment. There is a power transition happening. I'm not talking on the specifics, but I'm sure you'll pull it out of me in the Q&A session. There is a lot of instability globally. There is a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of violence in the world today. It hasn't stopped. There are a lot of, the phenomena of fundamentalism, radicalism, sectarianism, all that is growing a lot, extremism, not just in India but everywhere else. There's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of uncertainty. That's just not there, but in our region as well. Maritime security has taken center stage in the last 5 or 6 or 10 years, and you would read that wherever our Prime Minister goes to a different country, they try and sign some kind of memorandum of understanding. The first point on that is maritime security, because the world is seized of the fact that everybody's stability and security at sea is the tide that raises all boats. And that is fundamental to the global economy, that is fundamental to the regional economy, that is fundamental to the Indian economy. And the Indian Navy plays a dominant role in making sure that happens. Nations, as they're built, they protect, they promote, and they project their own national interests. How successful they are depends on what national power they build. What national power they build depends on what economy they have, what military they have, what diplomatic heft they have, what industrial capacity they have, and the rest of it. What place they have in the international system depends on how actively they engage with people, how they make their hard power, soft power, smart power work in the world, how they are perceived by people in the region and outside. The Indian Navy enables India in all of this. So it's important. In the 21st century, if you want to be successful and you want to fulfill your national aspirations as India, as an emerging economy, as a growing country, as a country that's increasingly showing itself as being a kind of a leader in the region and in the world, you've got to be able to connect, you've got to be able to protect, you've got to be able to do all that. The Indian Navy does all of this for the nation. We are a balanced, multidimensional and multispectral force. We have air power, we have surface ships, we have submarines. Not the biggest navy in the world, but big enough for us and big enough to do what we want to do. I've just come to the end of the end of my presentation. I'm just going to flash a few slides. These are not in any particular order, but just to give you an idea of the platforms that we operate in the Indian Navy. This, of course, is the aircraft carrier INS Vikramaditya. That is one of our latest submarines. That is one of our latest Guardian missile destroyers of the Kolkata class. These are ships. We've got a tanker and 2 frigates alongside. This is one of our Kilo class submarines as well, patrolling the high seas. This is the aircraft carrier on a routine deployment, replenishing from a tanker, and this we can do hundreds of miles away. Those tankers make these kind of forces self-sustainable hundreds of miles away for months together. This is one of our latest submarines, the Kalvari class. We had an international fleet review in 2017, and this is a lineup of the Indian ships. And then, of course, we had 2 aircraft carriers, the Vikramaditya and the Virat. And we are one of the few nations that has the expertise and the ability to build, operate, and of course, and maintain aircraft carriers in the world. It's a huge task. And like Commodore Subramaniam just said, having an aircraft carrier is not only a matter of prestige, but it adds a lot of value to what we do in our nation. That's one of our nuclear boats, the MiG-29Ks. This is an indigenous Shivalik class guided missile frigate. This is the P-8 type Poseidon. It's a Boeing aircraft which has been a game changer for us. Hugely capable maritime reconnaissance aircraft and an anti-submarine warfare aircraft. These are ships of the Talwar class, the frigates bought from Russia. We've got 6 of them. We're getting 3 more of them. This is a ship of the same kind, patrolling the high seas. This is the latest of the guided missile destroyers indigenously built of the Kolkata class. This is once again the Shivalik class, beautiful ships, indigenously built, guided missile frigates. This is the Advanced Light Helicopter, the ALH, which is again one of our success stories of Indian industry. This is the fast attack craft, the patrolling. So ladies and gentlemen, let me just say once again that this has been a great honor and pleasure for me to be here. I just want to assure you that it's a tough world, but you have a competent Navy, and when the chips are down, we will never let you down. It's been an honor and privilege. Thank you so much. Do I stay here?
Thank you, Admiral. We'd like to have a brief fireside chat with you, led by my co-trustee, Old Cottonian, Obama scholar, and founder of the National School of Journalism, Timothy Franklin. We will thereafter open up the floor to questions.
What an honor, a scholar soldier in our midst. A big round of applause for Admiral Swaminathan. One of the joys of doing things in person is that it's more human. And I'm going to make this small 10-minute chat a little more human, and then we'll open it up again for all the wonderful questions, strategic questions that you may have. But this is a very serious question, and I think it's on the minds of many people here. Clearly, there must have been a matter of grave importance, something really serious that must have happened when you were 11 years old, that you decided to flee the gates of the school and go and join the Sainik school. Can you please explain to us the thought process and what happened?
One of life's mysteries. I was a very happy kid, and we lived in South Bangalore and come to the school every day, my brother, my sister, and myself. My sister, of course, went to the girls' school, and me and my brother would come here. I remember those very happy days. We wore khakis, khaki shirt, khaki shorts, black shoes, and black socks, and uniformly, I think all of us had khaki-colored haversacks to carry our books in, and a bag in which we carried our lunch. We take a bus from where we lived and come here every morning. This school, of course, one of the things I noticed was that it's a lot more built up now than it was before. It's a lot more compact. It used to be very open. I can't remember the school, the first 11 ground being as small as I saw it today. It has been huge. And then we had an area on that side of the first 11 where there'd be a tree, and me and my brother would sit on the tree and open our tiffin boxes and have lunch together and go back and stuff like that. I remember I used to come into school from a gate somewhere that side and run into school, and there'd be a stairway that that came from two sides and took me to my classroom somewhere on top. Very, very happy days. But my father was a teacher in St. Joseph's College, and he somehow believed that one of his kids needed to join the armed forces, and I was made an offer that there's a damn good school called Sainik School Bijapur. Would you like to go? So I just did the entrance exam, and things happened very, very fast, and I joined school. But I'm going to tell you this. I owe a lot to what I did in Sainik School Bijapur, because it was the first time we in North Karnataka, and the school excels in a lot of things. It was an outstanding school even then. It's now even better now in terms of the facilities it offers people, the features it has, the discipline it has, the opportunities it gave people who came from all parts of the, and the largest proportion of people who study in that school are people who come from rural Karnataka, in the north of Karnataka. And for them to have an exposure of this kind is simply phenomenal. It was the same for me as well, because, I went there. But one of the things they taught me in that school was, you are nothing if you don't have a personal value system. So a lot of our education was not just based on physics, chemistry, maths, outdoor training, sports, PT, parade, and rest of it. But, one of the things that we people in uniform find very important is to have a personal value system as well. And I think one of the foundational lessons that I learned in my life was that you are nothing if you don't have a personal value system, and that I owe to Sainik School Bijapur. But I think, I wasn't ready for that switch. I was just bundled into a train and taken. I said, what the hell is happening to me? I said, hey, you've got admission there. Didn't you say some time back that? I said, but I didn't. I don't even remember that. I was just busy doing my stuff. But, it just happened, and I went. And I'm very happy to reconnect. It's been many years. It's been a busy life. I'd come to Bangalore many times, but never had the time to, come and visit ships. I didn't have the need, and frankly, didn't even know if anybody would be bothered to have me here. But 5 or 6 years back, when I was commanding the aircraft carrier, I got a call from somebody saying that, hey, you're from Cotton, so why don't you come here? And this has been a late reconnect, and I'm so grateful for it, because just walking past the school building today brought back memories that are so important to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral. And if we can, the world now knows about you. India is proud of you. Perhaps the most accomplished naval soldier we have now, and hopefully soon getting to the very top. But if we take away all the titles, everything to do with the Navy, if you'd like to just introduce yourself to this audience, who is Krishna Swaminathan?
So let me just answer that question in two parts. The first part is that, honestly, I don't think I'm one of those greater guys that you think I am. I said a lot about the Indian Navy. Let me say one more. We get people from all parts of the world to join the Navy. We get people from all parts of the society. And there's a huge debate on, whether or not we get the right kind of people. Are we getting the best in the society? Are we able to attract the best in the society? And that's a debate, of course, that's important, and that goes on. But we have a system of training, grooming, mentoring people in the Navy that, this is my personal view, and I say it with my hand on my heart, because I've been in the Navy for over 35 years now. Every single guy in the Navy is a special national asset. They're trained, they're motivated, they're disciplined, they can do anything. So for a lot of people, impossible is really a difficult word. I just did all of that because the Navy permitted me to do that. So this is not extraordinary, by the way. It is not at all extraordinary. It's a normal thing that a lot of naval officers do. Admiral Jacob is here, Admiral Vadgaonkar is here. They've done a lot more than I have. So I'm just one of those normal guys who's just been lucky. I've got my opportunities. But if you have about 250,000 people who apply to go to the NDA and you select only 300, you do a distillation of some serious consequences to get those 300 guys. Those 300 guys from the age of 16 to the age of 19 are rugged for 3 years, and they've got to survive that training as well. And once they get into the armed forces, from there starts the pyramid. there starts a pyramid. It's huge. I mean, they say it's a pyramid, but it's not a pyramid. It's an Eiffel Tower. It's got a broad base, and it just sticks up like a needle right on top. So after years and years of training and working, people get, moved out, and you move up. You've got to be really lucky. But my personal view is that, the armed forces, simply because of their ethos, their culture, their value system, and the rest of it, they produce damn good guys, and certainly I'd like to think that I'm not an exceptional guy. But who am I really? I'm a simple guy. I do simple things in my life. I like to keep myself active. I think my friends would probably introduce me as a slightly introverted guy, hardworking, but I'm very honest. Integrity is extremely high on my agenda. Loyalty to my organization is very important. I don't work for myself. I work for a team, and I think I've got the ability to build and maintain good teams, and that's been one of the foundational aspects of my growth in the Navy.
Thank you. Now, if we can maybe just dive a little back into the topic and a few specific questions, and then we'll open it up. In an article for ORF, a defense journalist Angad Singh writes, most major military powers, including China, have downsized military manpower in favor of technology. So if you look at the US, the Navy actually gets the highest spend, and the Air Force follows it, and the Army has the least because it's manpower intensive. Whereas in India, 56% of the defense spending is on the Army and a meager 15% on the Navy, less than that. So how can the Indian Navy hope to achieve its strategic and non-strategic objectives when Indian military thought remains landlocked?
So that's a damn good question, and that's a question that's been, in a way, in different forms, engaging us in the Navy a lot. But there is no one-size-fits-all kind of solution in terms of armed forces for various of various nations. It's left to every individual nation to see where it's standing in the world, what it wants to do, why does it want an armed force, and what does it expect its armed forces to do. For us, our threats, our more immediate threats, have been predominantly land-centric. We have immediate threats. We can't, you've held a tiger by the tail. You can't let go of the tiger. You've got to have somebody who continues to hold the tail. So our threats have been land-centric. We speak here in the luxury of this air-conditioned auditorium and cocktails and dinners simply because a lot of people are fighting there every single day. That happens. That is a live border on the north and in the west. So the armed forces themselves don't compete with each other. They can't, because there's no one armed force that can do everything that the nation wants the armed forces to do. We've got to work in concert. We've got to work together. We make our bid to the government, and the government gives us whatever the government thinks the government can give us. Nobody disagrees with the justification for more investment on the Navy. Nobody disagrees with the role and relevance and the future of the Navy. Nobody has any doubt on the hugely significant role the Navy will play in national growth and national development and national security in the years to come. But we have an army that has a purpose, that has a standing, that has a job, that it does every single day. So it's a matter of how do we balance our resources and how much we can give. But that, let me just assure you, this discussion happens not at my level, at levels much higher than mine, but it happens every single day, and we make our bid. Everybody makes a bid. When the kitty is limited, you've just got to get what you have. But let me also say one more thing to you. There is nothing called a perfect army or a perfect navy or a perfect air force, or for that matter, a perfect ship. There are several levels of imperfection that are there. It's important for us to know we've got a problem, we've got a resource, and we've got to use this resource to solve the problem. So a lot of our armed forces, irrespective of what our budget is, it's been ingrained in us that, while we try to get the best, and we want the best always, you've got to fight with what you have. Because in our context specifically, we've not had the luxury of saying, let's close down shop for 10 years and rebuild ourselves and come back after 10 years. Because our threats are immediate, they're present, they're real, and they're significant. So we've got to, this whole argument about why do we not want only indigenous products, and that I think is a misconception completely, because we want indigenous products, because the indigenous products give us a lot more assurance of availability. We have indigenous production, we have much better product support, all of that. It's less expensive, plus we want our own stuff to come in. But we can't wait for indigenous products to come after 10 years, because we are fighting a here and now kind of war. So the armed forces don't compete with themselves. The armed forces do what they have to do. We've got live problems. It's being discussed. These are issues that don't have easy solutions. We've got to be engaging at them, and we do them. We hope in the fullness of time the Navy's importance will be recognized a lot more, because the Navy does a lot that impacts national security and impacts events on land as well. So hopefully we will be able to convince the government with the argument and get a little more. But the Army's got a huge role to play, and we don't want to take away anything from the Army. We want the government to give the Army what the Army wants, and give us what we want as well.
Thank you for that candid answer. Just to push you a little bit on this, and for the benefit of those of you who don't know, the Army, 82% of the Army's defense spending is on revenue expenditure, which is basically paying salaries and pensions, and 18% on capital expenditure, which is equipment. And it's much higher in the Navy. I think it's more than 50%, and which is why I do think, I'm not sure whether we're heading in the right direction. And I think, yes, please.
So I just like to, make one small comment there. You don't need to downsize for the sake of downsizing. You've got your security requirements. You've got the wherewithal to address them. You've got to address them the best way you know. If you don't have the technologies, if you don't have the equipment, you have. I mean, we fight in terrain that nobody else in the world fights in. So, we've been trying to transform our armed forces for decades, and we've been doing it in whatever form we can. But if you want boots on the ground, you can't downsize so much. The demands on the Army, the demands on national security, the demands of engaging in all parts of the world, unless they reduce, you can't downsize. So it's, we don't want to be in a position where we just get, oh, he's downsizing, so let's downsize. That's in vogue, so let's do this, let's do this. We've got to build our own armed force and make it respond as effectively as it can to our own requirements. We have our systems, we've got to make them the best that they can be. Of course, there's huge scope for improvement, and there's huge scope for reduction of manpower, because we all recognize this. I mean, we are seized with this, and we get hammered every now and then because of the pension bills, which are growing, and how does the nation afford it? So we've got to do that. We can't downsize tomorrow. We can't downsize the day after. We've got to do it systematically. We've got to do it methodically. We need to know how much, to what extent, by when, so that we don't have so much turbulence that we're not so effective in our current jobs.
Thank you very much. If we can just talk a little bit about naval strategy, or should we now say maritime strategy? We've talked about the Indian Ocean region. We've been for many years the predominant sea power, and you haven't, and I think official documents don't talk about it, but can you identify for us the primary threat we have there? It used to be Pakistan. What is the primary threat in the region, and what are we doing about it as a Navy?
So I think the primary threat in the region is broadly insecurity. The region has a lot of insecurity. There are a lot of nations that have a lot of security problems. We as a region lend ourselves to extra-regional intervention. Nations are extensions of human beings, and the concept of nationhood is intensely a human concept. So nations behave like human beings would behave. So where there's a power vacuum, somebody will come in. Where there's an insecurity, somebody will come in to give security. So I just think that it's difficult to say there's one main threat. I would just say there is a threat, and that threat is very complex, and it's a combination of a lot of things. So obviously we have a standing threat in the form of Pakistan, but Pakistan is a country that we hopefully outmatch in many metrics. But the fact is, just saying that does not make it any less a threat. It continues to be there. We've got China, and we had a war with China. We have an unresolved boundary issue with China, and of course, you will know that among all major countries, ours is the only country that China has not resolved its boundary with, and so it's kept the boundary, the disputed boundary simmering for decades. We are the peer competitor, so for good reasons, China feels us a threat also of some kind. From 1962, we've always been a little suspicious of the Chinese because, finally, what is a threat? A threat is basically a function of capability and intent. So you always have an intent to harm somebody, but you don't make it clear. You leave it a little ambiguous, and you continue building capability. That's been the story with China. They've been building capability for the last 3 or 4 decades at some breathtaking pace. The Navy has grown phenomenally in the last 20 years. The Chinese Navy is the biggest Navy in the world in any case now. But when you build so much capability and we don't know your intent, then you automatically become a threat. There have been a threat, and we've always kept wondering whether there would be a time when it happened. And that time has come, because on the 15th of June last year, when they engaged in fisticuffs with the Indian Army soldiers there, I think we've crossed an inflection point there. So we've got a conventional threat, a standing conventional threat in the north and the west, and we've got a host of unconventional and asymmetric threats in the ocean region.
And the string of pearls, or whatever you may call it, China's naval base in Djibouti. They've joined the US, I guess Japan, Italy, other countries. Any reason why India may consider having a naval port in Djibouti, or is that something that isn't relevant to us, given how critical that area is especially if you have aspirations to be a global power?
So there are several elements in that question, and it's a very loaded question. But firstly, the Indian Armed Forces don't operate by themselves. We align ourselves to national policy. We get national approval for everything that we do. So the deployment of the Indian Armed Forces is guided largely by the national perspective on why armed forces are used. Largely, we have been governed by our nation's ethos of non-interference anywhere else. We are not an expansionist country. We would just want to look after our security needs. And largely, to be fair, our own security priority is to just make sure our neighborhood is stable. We don't have any, as a nation, we don't have any expansionist views. We don't have a vision to be bigger than we are. Historically and traditionally, we are a nation that has been soft power, heavy. Our culture, our traditions, our values, our intellectual thought, our those kind of things have gone all over the world, but we are not in the territory grab kind of thing. So our armed forces have been used for self-protection and stability and security in the region. I don't know whether the government would be happy to ask us to go and get bases unless it's absolutely important. But frankly, if we confine ourselves to the Indian Ocean region, we don't need those bases. We could operate independent of them. Of course, if we get them, they'll be very, very useful. It's not easy to get bases. A country like Djibouti could say, I've given Japan a piece of land, I've given the US a piece of land, why don't you give China a piece of land? They can do that. We can also go and get a base there if you give us some definite competitive advantage in combat. We could get a base there. What do we stay there? What do we station there? Those are matters of detail. But certainly, we need to take into account where China is investing its money, where it is making its presence. But all of that form a part of our overall plans, and we watch all developments like hawks on a daily basis. Many times we may be able to respond to them immediately. Many times it may not be necessary for it to respond to them. But we put those dots down and try and connect those dots and try and see what the big picture is, and we do that. A string of pearls and things like that, every nation is free to do what it wants. If you think your national interest lies in engaging with A, B, C, and D, and A, B, and C, and D are willing to engage with you, others can do nothing about it. We don't like it. But if our neighbors are enticed by China and they are willing to cooperate with China and give them bases, we tell them in the backroom channels, hopefully, I don't have any knowledge on that, but hopefully we tell them that But you know, just like we want to protect our national interests, so do all other nations, and they'll do whatever they think is best in their own national security calculus. These are developments that we have seized off. We note them on a daily basis. We try and respond to them as best as we can. Do we have a base in Djibouti? No. Are we likely to get a base in Djibouti? I'm not even sure we've made that bed yet. But at the moment, we don't think we need a base there, for the Navy at least.
Thank you. Thank you, Admiral. And one final question, and then I'm going to open up the floor for questions from the audience. Clearly, the Navy would like to have a bigger pie, bigger share of the pie. And hypothetically, over the next 10 years, if there were unlimited resources, what would you, Admiral, do to make sure you achieve everything that you talked about so eloquently in your lecture?
So, and this is important for the audience to know as well. Admiral Jacob is here, and Commodore Subramaniam so beautifully said how we plan our future force level. There is one part of the Navy that always throws itself into the future and looks ahead 25, 30 years and tries to imagine what the world might be then, who might be our friends, who might be our threats, what are the capabilities those guys are going to have, and therefore what is it that we need to do today to build the capabilities that we need then. You know, so it's called perspective planning, and we have a very, you know, strong culture of perspective planning in the Navy. So we have had an outlook, and we know who our friends and enemies and neighbors are going to be, and we have a plan to build our armed forces that way. We have been making a bid to be a 3-aircraft carrier Navy from the time we were founded. It has not happened. We still think that an aircraft carrier is an article of faith for us. We have been organized and structured to be a carrier battle group and operate as a carrier battle group. The aircraft carrier in our concept of operations has been the centerpiece of everything that we plan and we want to do. We want to have one aircraft carrier on either side that goes there, because we believe truly that aircraft carriers give the nation huge potential and huge flexibility where it's required. And sometimes where the nation needs to project itself militarily, maybe 500, 600,000 miles away. If you're not there and you've lost a window of opportunity, then sometimes, in the ebb and flow of events, you get one moment to strike, and if you've lost that moment, you've lost it. Aircraft carriers give you that ability, and I think that's important. So certainly, nuclear attack submarines is something that we've made a strong bid for, and we're getting them. So aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, a good networked, high technology force, which we already are. So purely in terms of hardware, I would say we are a very competent, balanced Navy that is able to, address in some form all the threats that we have. Maybe an infusion of technology and numbers there. But largely, if somebody said you have unlimited resources, I would try my best to do something for the naval personnel, because to my mind, one of the big honors and privileges of life of being a military leader is to work with the people that we work with. It's difficult to describe them. They work day in and day out. They don't complain. They come from all parts of the world. They are so loyal. They are so devoted to the work. Many people that we work with, and sometimes it's easy to lose sight of how important they are to what you do. They do your bidding, and without questioning. I think the Indian Armed Forces personnel have been an example of dedication to the nation, devotion to duty, and loyalty to the organization. And I think there's a lot we can do for them.
Thank you. If we can have the audience lights on, please. And if you can just put your hands up, and we'll have some of the prefects come around and give you tokens. I think we'll have time for 6 or 7 questions. Just put your hands up and they'll give you a token. While they're doing that, Admiral, do you just want to tell people what it means to command, the Vikramaditya? I don't think people understand the scale of this. Was it 6,000, 7,000 people? If you can just give people a sense of what it means to command the Vikramaditya.
The Vikramaditya is the biggest ship that we've had, and probably for some time to come will be the biggest ship that we are likely to have. 45,000 tons, a massive ship. It's not a ship that was designed to be an aircraft carrier. It grew into becoming an aircraft carrier, so it had to be modified a lot. Very high performance ship, carries high performance aircraft. It's a township by itself. Colloquially, anybody who is selected to be the captain of an aircraft carrier, when the news is broken out to him, people just say, congratulations, Mayor. Because that ship is not a ship, it's a town. And it's a town that has verticals that work on it, and it never sleeps. It's a town that never sleeps. It has people who work round the clock. There are verticals. When aircraft take off, they come and land, and they just park somewhere, and somebody's working on the aircraft and get it back on there. When you have high performance aircraft, the need for maintaining them on board is huge. So the air department just never sleeps. They're just getting aircraft ready. They're getting sorties done. The ship is powering herself. There are 5,000, 6,000 people on the ship. There are tons of chapatis being made every day. There's food, there's bakery. It's a ship that never sleeps. But Vikramaditya by itself, and that's generally true for all aircraft carriers, irrespective of the country of origin. But Vikramaditya was a very complex ship because, like I said, she wasn't designed to be an aircraft carrier, and therefore she had a lot of, issues to deal with. The MiG-29K, and this is open source knowledge, so let me just say it to you. No other country in the world operated MiG-29K. We took on the MiG-29K, when we started making her perform on the deck, we discovered a lot of things that needed a lot of attention. So the ship was tense to run, the aircraft was tense to run, every single sortie was tense. But the genius of the Indian Navy personnel is that, within that 13 months of my command, we just transformed the ship a lot. And, this is an ongoing journey. She's even better now. In our system, when a ship is commissioned, the first captain normally accepts the ship, and, you sign a contract, the ship is built. The ship is built to certain specifications, and his job it is to make sure that the ship answers those specifications. So he does a whole host of trials, tests, this, that, and make sure the ship is, is exactly what it is, like it was designed. It's the second captain who actually puts the ship through the paces. He expands the envelope. He takes those risks to see what the ship is capable of achieving, so that we start writing our doctrine and things like that. So I was the second captain of Vikramaditya. So the first captain had the huge task of accepting the ship, supervising the ship being built, getting understanding the systems, training the people and all that. I had the great responsibility of operationalizing the ship, which meant, launching the aircraft. All those aircraft were tested in Russian waters, in the Russian environmental conditions, and ours are hugely different. So do they give the same performance? Do we push them? How do we do it? So night flying, all of that. All I can say is when I came to command Vikramaditya, I had finished about 30 years of service in the Navy. Nothing that I had done before that had prepared me for the job, and nothing that I've done after that has been equal to the job.
Oh. Thank you. And if you can, number one, who has number one? And I'm going to just, Admiral, would you prefer to take your question standing or, yeah? Okay, great.
Good evening, Admiral. Yusuf here on this side. First of all, thanks for coming back. If you recall, in 2016 is when you accepted the invite on behalf of the Old Cartoons Association to address the boys over here. And also to inform the audience over here, the Admiral was kind enough to invite all of us to INS Vikramaditya. And we took 450 boys from here to INS Vikramaditya when it was in Karwar. So please accept our gratitude for doing that for us. Thanks to KST for inviting Admiral over here. Admiral, my question is something which you just touched about. First of all, the topic was great, and you've done a great job addressing the issues, which is economic security. You talked about us not requiring anything beyond the Indian Ocean, but as a growing economy, we'll be the third largest economy by the end of this decade, and it will be there for the considerable period of time. Will probably be about, say, $7 trillion by about 2030, 15 trillion by the next decade, our requirements will grow. So will we remain just an Indian Ocean Navy, where the primary area of responsibility, as the Navy describes, just remains Indian Ocean? Or even the secondary areas of responsibility, which the Indian Navy describes, which is South China Sea and going towards, that will also become a primary area of responsibility. And considering that, and considering even that the naval modernization, acquiring capital warships, is a very long-run process. You know, an aircraft carrier takes 10, 15 years to build and then serves for another 50 years. Can we take certain decisions today or not take certain decisions today which will affect our security 20, 30, 40 years from now? So how do you see the Navy address that in terms of its area of responsibility and how we can plug those gaps, considering that we have financial constraint, but can we take those, not take those decisions today which will affect our security for our grandchildren? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very layered question. The short answer to the last part of the question is, can we afford not to take a decision? Certainly we cannot. We've got to take a decision where we've got to take a decision, and we've got to balance out all factors and take the best decision that we can take. But I just like to thank you, Yusuf, that I didn't say that. I didn't mean to give the impression that we are confined to the Indian Ocean region. I just said that our primary interests are in the Indian Ocean region, and our predominant security considerations are also in the Indian Ocean region. So I was just trying to describe in a way the complexity of the operational environment in which the Indian Navy functions, because it's got all kinds of threats, and these threats threaten just not us but threaten others as well. And so it's a contested space. It's geopolitically very sought after. There are all kinds of things there. The Indian Navy's official articulation is that the Indian Ocean region is only its primary area of responsibility. We have an official secondary area of responsibility as well. But the Indian Navy does not operate in isolation. The Indian Navy operates the way the nation wants us to operate. So if we trace the history of the Indian Navy itself, it roughly parallels the history of the Navy, of the nation. When we got our independence in 1947, we were a small Navy, a relatively small economy. We started growing. We had views, ambitions, aspirations, and a perception of ourselves and the role that we can play in international affairs 30, 40 years from then. And so we made a first plans paper. The Navy plans paper was made in 1959, and it actually came out in 1961. The naval plans paper 1961 was so good that it was scary for a lot of people, because it was then that we envisaged ourselves having a 3-carrier group Navy that worked on all kinds of things. But the Navy grows only to address the nation's need, and it's a question of availability and affordability both. So the Navy grew modestly. We had the war, and 71 war, and we played a damn good role with whatever we had. We moved on. I think we crossed a hump, late 80s, because the whole of the 80s, we call it a lost decade because there wasn't any investment in the Navy. But two things happened at the end of the 1980s. The first thing, of course, was the end of the Cold War. The end of the Cold War, in a way, unshackled a lot of things that kept India constrained during the Cold War. You couldn't talk to everybody, you couldn't engage with everybody, you couldn't have trade with everybody. And suddenly, all that opened. So our foreign policy itself became a little more open. We started engaging more actively with all parts of the world. We started sending our ships on all parts of the world. So there were no constraints. Everybody was a friend, and we could go wherever we wanted, and we could operate wherever we wanted. The second thing that happened exactly at that time was our economic liberalization in the early 90s. So that just opened up our markets to foreign investment, the need for us to invest outside. We became a lot more integrated with the international economic system. And therefore, we find it important that we contribute to the international economic system. So while Indian investments went all over the world and foreign investments started coming in, our economic integration made us a lot more globalized as a nation. And when you're globalized and you've got interests there, you've got to protect those interests. So the Navy started going out. So I think the Indian Navy, kind of turned a bend in the early 90s. And from then on, our deployment patterns have just exploded Because we are, I mean, I have a slide in my laptop that can show you where we are deployed on every single day. We've got presence all over the world. If you believe that you need presence there, then you've got to make sure you're present there. And therefore, we need a large Navy. So certainly our interests are not confined here. We don't have territorial interests. We are not an expansionist country, and we do just what national policy tells us. National policy tells us that we need to protect our interests, we need to promote our interests. And if our interests are just exercising with the US Navy, we'll just go where we need to exercise. If our interests are just to show that Indian technology is good, it's come of age, we go and do that. If our interests are just go to engage somebody and just show a goodwill, go on a goodwill visit, we go there. But I think it's important for us to be seen in various parts of the world because we are a good nation, we are a good Navy, we want people to engage with us and spread goodwill and the rest of it there. But we are a global Navy. I mean, we are a global Navy, we deploy all over the place, but we don't have global ambitions as a nation. And this Navy will be used only to the extent that national ambition permits.
Thank you. Can we have people with token number? Here you go. Token numbers 2, 3, and 4. And if you can keep your question brief. And so is it okay if we can take 3 questions at a time so that we are almost at time? 2. Token number 2. Who's got token number 2? Where's the mic? Okay, there it is. Rahul. Rahul.
Thank you for a very inspiring lecture, Admiral. We enjoyed it. You know, lately in the news, we've heard a lot about the Quad coming back after a few dormant years. I believe it was first, institutionalized in the year 2004 after tsunami, right? How do you see the Quad now unfolding, given increasing and rising threats from China? And how do you see the Indian Navy participating in the Quad and taking things ahead from here, now that it's come back into the flash?
Thanks, Rahul. Can we have another question, please? If you can introduce yourself.
Good evening, sir. First of all, it's a great pleasure seeing you here, and even great being able to interact with you. So my question for you is, what were the challenges you faced in the initial stages of your training? And what advice would you like to give students our age who are interested to join the Indian Armed Forces?
You got a pen?
Thank you.
And token number 4. So if you could just introduce yourself and briefly ask the question.
Good evening, sir. My name is Ravindra. You mentioned 2 choke points, Hormuz and the Straits of Malacca, basically between Rondo Point and Indra Point, Great Channel. In case of hostilities, will the Indian Navy be able to dominate these 2 choke points, considering that all the 3 combatants depend on Persian Gulf oil, and India's oil reserves are between 20 and 25 days? Thank you.
I'll take these. Okay, thank you. Very, very good questions. The Quad, of course, was a formulation, like you rightly said, that was formed loosely at the spur of the moment after the 2004 tsunami, when the 4 navies worked together and they found that they complement each other a lot, and they can work together. And then, of course, recently, it had a surge in interest in the Quad, simply because there's a threat, and everybody has a common threat. Everybody perceives a common threat, and it's good to come together. But we don't want to give the impression that the Quad is some kind of a military arrangement, because it is not. It is a formulation among nations, among 4 like-minded nations. It's a loosely structured arrangement. They've come together and with an intent that they'll work together. What they're going to achieve, they don't want to articulate very specifically. But we are happy to go along with Quad and get whatever advantage we as a nation can get from the Quad. But we've got to be realistic on what the Quad can do and what the Quad cannot do, because there are 4 members. Each of those members also have their own national interests, and each of them are quite legally and legitimately allowed to do whatever they want based on their own national interests. My personal view is that we've got to look after ourselves. Of course, we need to engage with others and take help from people when we need to. But we've got to stand up as a nation and build our own capabilities, whatever our threats are. How long can you keep relying on others first? Second, in this interconnected world that we spoke about, that kind of the kind of help that you want is not likely to be forthcoming, because who's going to stick his neck out to do something else when it's hurting you, hurting you yourself. So while we want the Quad to grow, do a lot more things, we've got to be realistic about what the Quad actually stands for, what it can achieve, and how much leverage we could have within the Quad. And I think that, and a lot of commentators have said that in the Quad, of course, we are perhaps not so strong. We need to, kind of do a lot more to get the same heft in Quad than anybody else. But it's a new formulation, and we don't know where it's going to go. But certainly, it is not a military arrangement, so we have nothing to do with it. It's only a coincidence that Exercise Malabar has the same 4 Quad partners there. But Malabar, of course, predates the Quad. It predates the Quad. But, this is increasingly going to happen, because, if you want to collaborate with each other, then you look for like-minded nations who like to do things. And how do you become like-minded when, 4 different people who are based in 4 different corners of the world, how can they suddenly become like-minded? They become like-minded simply because they perceive a common purpose. That purpose needs to be articulated and taken forward. But, we've got to be autonomous. We've got to do our own stuff. We can't keep relying on Big Brother all the time. We do our own stuff, and, we are strong enough to do that. And by the way, we are a threat simply because we are strong. If you've got to be a major player in the world today, you either have to be respected or you've got to be feared. We are respected in the world, so we don't need anybody else. Joining the armed forces, when there was a suggestion that I'd come here and I'd come in a business suit like this and speak to people, I said, no, I'm going to come in my uniform, because anybody who works in the uniform, whether it's in the police or the armed forces or wherever, we're very proud of our uniform. And I think, if you ever want to serve the nation directly in a good way, being in the uniform is probably the best. It's tough. It's not easy. Depending on which service you join, you could join the police service, you could join the Army, Air Force, Navy, wherever. It's a tough life, but it's an honorable life. It's a rewarding life. You don't get everything in your life that you want. Certainly, I don't get everything that I want. But what you get is a lot, and you can lead a very nice, happy life with it. But there is this the joy of doing something new, something challenging every single day of your life. When you have a team, you have a task, you have challenges, overcoming that on a daily basis, it helps you grow intellectually, it helps you grow as a person, it helps you grow professionally. The armed forces promote all of that. And I think it's a clean service, it's a very rewarding service. I've been in uniform for 44 years of my life, and I'm the happiest for that. So you must do that. But did you ask me specifically how do I prepare for training there? Well, it's a tough life. The NDA, you said? The good news, of course, is that NDA is going to have girls. So that's great incentive. You can join the NDA tomorrow. It's tough. Nobody can prepare you for what happens in NDA. You can do whatever you want. I went to a Sainik school, which is a military school. We do some bit of that, but nobody prepares you. But the good thing is that it happens. It happens. Everybody goes through that. You become tough. They believe that, when you're physically tough, you become mentally tough as well. Of course, you do all of that, but it all happens. When you go there, you just immerse yourself into the environment. You see the purpose. You see your position. Many times you don't have an option. And when you have an option, you don't want to take that option. You just want to fall in line and do it. It's a bunch of people who train themselves. It's a high energy kind of lifestyle. If you want to, you've got to be ready to work hard and work smart. But it's a great career. Please do that. We'll be very happy. What is the third question about choke points?
This is the choke points and...
what was the question, sir? Was those 2 choke points, Hormuz and Malacca? Yes, sir. So what was the question? will we dominate those straits? Got it, got it. Okay, so those are choke points, and those are very important choke points, and like I showed in my, on my thing, there are very important choke points, and they are important for international trade, and because of that, in a roundabout kind of manner for international security. Nobody might be happy if anybody goes and closes those choke points, but you know, we don't need to go and close the choke points for the sake of doing that. What we do in the armed forces is that you build capability on a daily basis. How you deploy that capability in combat depends on what plans you make. And many of those plans are very, very situational. You know, you don't build a capability to block a choke point. You may not need to block a choke point. You know, it depends on what the situation is, what are your aims and objectives, and you make your plans according to that. Do we have the ability to dominate the straits? Maybe yes, because we don't know what dominating the straits mean. You can dominate the straits by having one platform there, you know. International trade is so fickle. You just need to sink one ship there and no other ship will go there, because insurance costs will go up, all kinds of things will happen, you know. So you don't need to be there on a daily basis. I mean, that is the challenge of being a security guy. If there's an explosion here tomorrow, you know, one guy just comes and drops a bomb and goes away. It may not hurt anybody, but it creates a panic. You know, so you just create a panic in those straits for the few days. If you're looking at a short, limited war, create those, you know, panic in those few days in those places, your war objectives perhaps may be achieved. But you don't build an armed force to choke points and those kind of things. You build an armed force that's capable of doing a broad spectrum bring about a broad spectrum of effects. And when you have a situation, you do that. But certainly, we have a Navy that is, may not dominate anything, but is certainly capable of hitting hard and hitting in a way that it hurts. So you don't have to kill somebody to change his behavior. You can hurt him sufficiently to change his behavior, and that we can do whoever he is.
Well, thank you. I think we are at time, so maybe we'll stop here, and perhaps, you know, when we are done, if the Admiral has some time, you can, you know, maybe casually ask him the question. Thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful lecture and for being so candid. It has been such a pleasure and an honor. Karan, over to you.
This has been a great honor and pleasure for me to be here. Thank you so much for taking your time out and coming to listen to me. I can't tell you how deeply honored I am. My very respected seniors from the Navy have come. This has been very touching, been most rewarding. And even if, you know, I had said to myself before I started the talk that even if I see shoes or rotten eggs or tomatoes flying at me, it would still be a worthwhile visit. I've been so delighted to be here. Thank you very much for having me here. Where the Indian Navy goes, there the Indian Navy leaves a small imprint. So please allow me to present to the principal of the school a small picture that I've carried with me from Bombay for one of his balls. This is a picture of INS Vikramaditya with its air wing on the deck. It's been a great honor to be invited by the General Thimayya Memorial Trust for this lecture. May I leave something for the trust as well? May I request one of the trustees to please come and accept it?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. The past couple of years have been difficult for us and I'm sure that all of us have experienced loss in some way or the other. We acknowledge the memory of several Cottonians, teachers and friends of the Trust who have passed on in this period, particularly during the second wave. Teachers, Mrs. Susan Rao, Mrs. Selina Tanveer, Mrs. Victorine Sham, Mr. Chandran, Mr. John Vincent, admin staff. Old Cottonians, K. Chakrapani, Vijay Chand Kapoor, Jamshed Lentin, Wing Commander Gunaratnam David, Christy Cherian, and a dear friend of the lecture, Mr. Ravi Sondi. May I request you all to please stand up and maintain a minute's silence in memory of all those that we have lost. Thank you. Please be seated. It has always been the objective of the Trust to give back meaningfully to the school. Our speakers and medal winners over the past 17 years have included soldiers, scientists, teachers, journalists, doctors, environmentalists, and members of the civil services. It is our endeavor through these activities not only to showcase Cottons and its alumni to the outside world, but more importantly, to motivate and inspire present students of the Grand Old School. One of the more important things that we do for our alma mater is recognizing former members of our teaching, administrative, and support staff with a citation and a check for ₹1 lakh from our Benevolent Fund. The fund comprises of donations made not only by Cottonians, but non-Cottonians as well, and we are thankful to our donors. Our donees include retired gardeners, carpenters, cooks, ground staff, bus drivers, and conductors that have watched over so many young Cottonians, retired teachers and principals who have kept us on the straight and narrow. This is our way of giving back to you for all the years that you have invested in looking after generations of Cottonians. This year's recipients from the Benevolent Fund are Mrs. Santosh Amma, Mr. John Brown, Mrs. Parimala, and Mr. Uttam Raj. Our next three recipients unfortunately passed away earlier this year, and you'll recognize their slides from the obits, and their checks were given to their next of kin. In the 6 years since we initiated the fund, we have handed out ₹56 lakh to deserving staff members and their families. As a special case earlier this year, we have also contributed ₹5 lakh towards St. John's Hospital's COVID-related efforts. If we were to add the years of collective service of our donees, it would translate to around 1,565 years of service to the school. At the heart of what we do and why we do this are, of course, the students of Bishop Cottons. We hope that our speakers, medalists, and friends in the audience are able to inspire our students to be gentlemen like the late General Thimayya. Before I sign off, may I request our patron, Admiral Trevor Osman, Air Marshal Trevor Osman, to kindly hand over the citation to our speaker, Vice Admiral Swaminathan. May I now request the school captain, Nanjapa, to deliver the vote of thanks, followed by the national anthem. On behalf of my fellow trustees and myself, thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It has been over 15 months since we have seen this auditorium host an event of this magnitude. It is only fitting that the first event being hosted here is the General KS Thimayya Memorial Lecture, an event that perfectly personifies what being a Cottonian truly means. The lecture has become a calendar event in our Cottonian library, and we look forward to it every year. The lecture is an all-Cottonian event, being hosted by trustees who are Cottonians, and in honor of a Cottonian. It is aspirational, especially for our students, and it relays the Cottonian spirit for batches to come. This institution has been home to many great leaders, especially from the armed forces. And it is my hope that some of our students follow in the footsteps of General KS Thimayya and Vice Admiral Krishna Swaminathan and join these armed forces. As a boy hailing from Kodagu, the General's hometown, you often hear a lot of tales regarding the General's bravery, and they all draw you to the same conclusion, that the General is a born soldier. In an incredible but happy coincidence, I learned just last week that my great-grandfather and the General's father were classmates at the Madras Christian College batch of 1902. I would like to thank our speaker, Vice Admiral Krishna Swaminathan, for delivering an inspirational and riveting lecture that has unquestionably stimulated us and will echo in our minds for a long time. On behalf of the Cottonian family, sir, I would like to extend our best wishes to you. I would like to thank our medalist, Commodore Kartik Subramaniam, for his service and exemplary efforts in improving India's shipbuilding capabilities. And again, sir, on behalf of the Cottonian family, we would like to extend our sincere thanks to you, sir. And we hope to see Admiral Swaminathan and Commodore Subramaniam at Cotton's even more often. Thank you to our principal, Professor Dr. S. Edwin Christopher, for his continued support and leadership in these trying times. We also thank Dr. Abraham Ebenezer, former principal, for his support towards the trust. This event would not be possible without the support of the patrons of the General KS Thimayya Memorial: Admiral Shekhawat, General S.K. Jetli, Air Marshal Osman, and the executive patron, Mr. C.N. Kumar. As the school captain, and on behalf of my fellow students, teaching and non-teaching staff, I would like to thank the trustees, Romil Turakia, Lokesh Ahuja, Timothy Franklin, and Karan Joseph, for putting this lecture together and contributing to their alma mater in a constructive manner. On behalf of the trustees, I would like to thank the mini army that makes this event possible: the maintenance staff, Mr. Shivana and his team, Ms. Mamta, and our old Cottonian Yash Khanna, and my fellow prefects. Above all, our thanks to the audience for your incredible patronage of the trust and its events over the years. May I request everyone to please stand for the national anthem.